Welcome to Cryptids, Crypts and Coffee, the podcast where two awkward Brits talk about horror with a bunch of unsuspecting guests. My name's Lou Yardley. You may recognise me as being the monster that stands at the end of your bed, but then when you turn the light on, I'm just a pile of clothes on a chair. Today I'm drinking a cup of tea, and I'm joined by my lovely co-host.
I don't know if I can top that introduction. That was brilliant. Hello, I'm Janine Pipe, the co-host of this wonderful podcast, and we are joined today by two very special guests, Villimey Mist, all the way from Iceland, and Nat Edwards, otherwise known as TC Parker, just to confuse everybody.
Yep.
Today we are going to have a special Women in Horror chat. So thank you, ladies, for joining us.
Thank you for having us. I feel bad now that I don't have a cup of coffee, though. I really failed to plan ahead with this one, given the name of the podcast.
We're all drinking tea. We've just drinking Crypts and Coffee, and we're all on tea.
I've got an empty pint glass. I feel kind of forlorn.
Just pick it up every now and then and pretend to drink.
Oh, it's fucking transparent. I can't even fool people. Sorry. Anyway.
Magical elixir. There you go. Okay, Lou, are you starting?
I am. I'm driving today, so if it all goes wrong, it's my fault.
Yeah.
Okay, since it's Women in Horror Month in February, and by the time this goes up, it will be February, we've got some Women in Horror kind of questions. So, as a woman, have you noticed any challenges or hurdles when it comes to writing horror or promoting your work? And what we're going to do is we're going to go around everybody each in turn. So if we start with Villimey, then on to Nat, and then on to Janine, and then me.
Yeah. Because I'm so relatively new to the horror community that I haven't really experienced this kind of stumble or this kind of roadblock that a lot of women have experienced in the horror field. But my 2 cents regarding that probably has to do with the market here in Iceland. There's no market in horror here. What you basically get here in Iceland is crime noir books and children's books. That's it. The market doesn't really want anything else. Getting any kind of fantasy or even horror for that matter is really, really, really low, which is a stupid thing. And we fantasy and horror writers, we are trying to up it up a little bit. So I think that's the only stumble or the roadblock that I've gotten, that here in Iceland, the market for horror is not really a thing here, which is why I branched out internationally.
Where do you find you get most of your sales?
Mostly through the UK and the States. Because my stories happen in the US, so of course people would relate a lot more to that.
Would you ever set anything in Iceland?
There are so many people that have asked me, especially with my series. They were like, "Why didn't you set it in Iceland?" And I'm like, I always kind of laugh, and then it goes into a maniacal laughter. Then I just say, "You guys realize I live in Iceland, right? It is an island in the middle of fucking nowhere in the North Atlantic." The population is 350,000 people. Everyone knows everyone here. It's if someone would commit murder, you would probably know it within a day or two.
A really quick murder mystery kind of.
And I'm like, where can you escape in Iceland? You can't. You just go around the country and then you're like, oh, I'm back again. In So no, I can't really base a lot of my in Iceland.
Okay, no.
I can't top that. Except to say that, Leicester's pretty small as well, to be fair. If somebody gets knocked off here, then chances are they know my mother. Do you know what I mean? So yeah. I don't know whether or not I'll be setting anything else in Leicester. Women in horror wise, not personally is, I suppose, what I'd say. I haven't personally felt like people haven't read anything that I've written because I'm a woman. Likewise, so I write crime as well. And obviously crime, especially in the UK, is kind of dominated by women for the most part. So it's not, I certainly haven't found it problematic in that sense. I think the other thing is because what I write is quite queer. And I think in that sense, the audience, I suppose, that I would want to cultivate wouldn't necessarily be the kind of people that would be like, well, fuck that, I'm not going to read a woman. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Having said that, I have seen people, especially sort of on Twitter or kind of people more generally on social media, essentially being skeptical about women being able to write horror, which is insane. I mean, it never even occurred to me before I started writing it, and certainly before I joined Twitter, for example, that there would be anyone that actually thinks that. You know what I mean? Just,
Yep.
it's insane. It's, I mean, like Mary fucking Shelley. Do you know what I mean? Like the earliest horror is women, like the monk and all that shit. Anyway, sorry, I digress. What's the monk I'm thinking of? Whoever that woman was, and what's her face? The point is, I mean, like horror and the Gothic and women, it's all sort of mutually imbricated, and it has been for centuries, certainly in Europe. So I don't know where the fuck that's come from, but there does seem to be a strand of weird misogyny that's like, well, women can't write. Maybe it's that women can't write extreme, which again is hilarious because some of the more extreme shit that I've read, you know, and indeed written recently, there's a lot of dismemberment, more and more with every book. Like, but I
do love a bit of dismemberment.
Yeah,
that's great. A lot of women do, quite honestly. Like, but it's, I mean, on a personal level, I don't think it's something that's affected me, because I think the kind of person that thinks that would pick up one of my books, see that it's full of dykes, and then just put it back down again. Do you know what I mean? Or like, or make a complaint to Waterstones or something. But like, so for me, not a problem, but I'm aware that it's a problem more generally in the community, and it pisses me off that there are people that think that, because it's obviously it's misogynist, but also it's insane. You know what I mean? Like, there's no logic to it, as well as it being offensive.
No logic at all.
Anyway, sorry, that's my 2 pence.
Well, I have to say that, first of all, I'm actually really pleased to hear that neither of you have experienced that kind of, as you say, like stumbling blocks and whatnot, because I'm the same. And again, I don't know whether it's because we're all relatively new to the genre, but if anything, I've found that a lot of people are kind of more welcoming in a way. Oh, brilliant, we need more women, you know, we need
absolutely,
more releases. People really do see, and whether that's because the majority of the people that I communicate with are other writers and reviewers and readers and whatnot, you know, I haven't ever walked into a shop and been like, woohoo, I'm a female writer, and people have been like, no, go away. So I think
please do this one day.
It's definitely a historical thing. For my own writing, because a lot of it is of the more splatterpunk and extreme, so going to that side as well. If you were to kind of reel off the main people in that genre, you've got like your Ketchums, your Edward Lees, Whitney Strieber, all those kind of Bentley Little, and you are looking at the more male writers. But I think that there are more and more coming through now. You know, why can't a woman write about all of the, you know, why can't you? I know that from listening to the chat that you did with Ross and Kev, that you don't write a lot of sex scenes within your stuff, but there's nothing to say that a woman can't go into that kind of thing as well.
Oh no.
No.
Exactly. And that, you know, there's this whole kind of thing that with like, oh, if a woman writes about sex, it's going to be romantic and that kind of stuff. They're not going to touch on the rape side of things, and it's not going to be more like pornographic and everything. But that is the other side of extreme horror, is that you have all of that with your torture and everything, alongside your dismemberment, your cannibalism. You have all of those kind of things. More and more of that's coming through with female writers now. Thank goodness.
Oh, absolutely. And I think there's a real thing actually with, you know, in terms of the stylistics, where there's almost an assumption, again, that kind of within that kind of misogynistic strand of thought, that if as a woman you write something, the kind of description that certainly something like splatter demands, you know, it's rich, vivid description of some pretty unpleasant shit. And I think there's this idea that as a woman, you must somehow look away. You know what I mean? And you won't be compelled to keep writing. You won't go darker. You won't go further with the descriptives. But actually, again, every single female writer that I can think of that writes at the more extreme end goes there. You know what I mean? It doesn't reflect the reality of what people are actually writing.
No, that's it. And that's not just because, as a woman, if you were to write something that involved maybe rape, and that's going to be like your big thing kind of thing, we're not going to be glorifying it in any kind of way whatsoever. But there's nothing to say that we can't include it within our text. If you're writing something horrific, as a woman, that's one of the worst things with that power and dominance and everything. That's one of the worst things that can happen to you. But there's all kind of like, oh, a woman wouldn't put that, they wouldn't dare, they wouldn't write about eating their own babies and stuff, because women can't do that kind of thing. But it's fiction, so of course we can.
Yeah.
Completely. And if it's about sort of the exorcism of fears as well, if one of the things that horror does is let you take all the shit that you're afraid of, or that culture tells you that you ought to be afraid of, and then sort of narratize it in a way that makes it more containable, then of course people are going to be doing that, you know what I mean? And again, the more vividly, the better, probably, because there is something, I think, cathartic in that.
That's right.
And it also helps, gets the point across. It's like, for example, in your story, Janine, that you put up in Britannica anthology, you weren't afraid to put, period blood there.
Yes.
And I was like, yes, we need this because, this is a daily occurrence. This is a natural thing that happened to women. And yet you don't really see a lot of that happening in stories written by men because, they can't experience it. And they still shy away from it because it makes them uncomfortable. But that's the point. You have to make it uncomfortable, even though it's a natural thing that happens to us.
Yep, definitely.
Really?
It's just crazy.
It really is. I remember when I was like writing down this notes for my vampire story, and it occurred to me like, wait, why wouldn't they, do something about period blood?
Yeah.
And I actually will be touching upon it when I will write down the prequel novel, which I need to be in a certain mindset for it because I need to be really angry. And when that comes, I'll definitely explain a lot more about it because why wouldn't you talk about something like that, which is something natural?
Yep.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Just as a sidebar, it's a different kind of blood, right? Again, obviously vampires, it's a different narrative logic, but like
kind of blood, it is mixed with a lot of other things in it, but it's still blood. And you will probably, if you were a vampire with a keen sense of smell, you probably smell it as well.
oh fuck
yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So it's
Sorry,
like
it's
we
a
just went to a
wholehearted
weird
agreement.
science podcast. Personally, I haven't really had any roadblocks or anything, but I think I'm quite new, and the people that I surround myself with on Twitter and that are all like really positive and encouraging. So I think I'm quite lucky in that respect. But we have started touching on the next question, I think. So we'll jump into that. Do you think there are common misconceptions about women in horror? If so, what are they? Villimey, if we go for you first again.
The common misconception is, I think, like if we go back historically, that they would only like focus on gothic horror or something like that, like this mysterious man in the castle or something like that. And people probably think if there's a woman who is writing horror, like, oh, she probably does something like that. But no, the things that I've read by women is so much more than that. Like we've basically been talking about, we can do extreme, we can do splatterpunk. We're not afraid of touching upon subjects that I think a lot of, I can't really generalize, but I think some men might not step into. So I think a lot of people will probably think, she probably won't go into the, extreme descriptions or anything like that, but we will really go there. It's one of the most fun things to do.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I think so. Yeah, all of that essentially. I think that the assumption that women won't go extreme, that they won't go extreme in terms of description as well. I think that they'll write in a more sort of elusive way rather than a full on. This is how it looks. This is this is the evisceration. This is the rape scene. This is the eating of the whatever. You know what I mean? Like that you'll allude to something and everything will happen off screen, I think is the other thing.
Yeah.
That there'll be, you know what I mean? Like there'll be clues of things, but you won't as a woman go all out and present. Yeah, absolutely, with the gothic sensibility as well, that there'll be, I suppose implicit in that is that there'll be a kind of romantic sensibility, and that whether it's a full-on love story or whether there's just there's kind of that sort of being carried away by something, or I've got a touch of the vapors romance about it. I think there's definitely a sense that as a woman you probably will write that somewhere. Equally, I think that as a woman you would be more sensitive as a writer as well as a reader. So even if you do get something out there, I suppose that's more of an extra textual thing rather than something that's sort of in the book. But certainly, like, I've had people, not people within the horror community, but people that have found out that I write horror basically saying like, oh, does it upset you? I'm like, are you going to sit down? And obviously not now because he's dead, but yeah, you know, would you have sat down with Jack Ketchum and been like, oh, were you all right after that, love? You know what I mean? Like, do you need a cup of tea? And I think there's that assumption there's a woman, you're somehow wrenching it from the depths of your soul every fucking time. And it's not necessarily the case, you know what I mean? Like, some things are very emotionally involving. Other times you just sat down and banging it out because you've got something that you need to get to, you know what I mean?
Yep.
So yeah, that's me.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything's been said so far. But touching on that, I think again, there's like this assumption with, like you said, with the emotional side of it as well. So you've got someone like Laurel Hightower, who writes that deep emotional, like mother-child kind of bonds and whatnot, and absolutely knocks it out of the park. But if I tried to write that, that's not my forte at all. You know, I'm all about, you know, your cannibals and your blood and your guts kind of thing. But I think it's almost like, oh, you're a woman, you can write that, can't you? You can do the feelings and all that kind of stuff. And that, you know, the same as every man can't write something, every woman can't write something.
Absolutely, or doesn't want to, you know, wants to try something a bit different.
That's it, definitely. And apart from that, the only things that I've written down is exactly what we've already got, that women will write gothic stories and men will write splatterpunk stories. And it's like, you know, there are some amazing gothic writers out there like Beverly Lee and all of, you know, her beautiful vampire stories that are all in that setting, and they're gorgeous, and she does that amazingly.
Really?
Again, I couldn't write that if I wanted to. It's just not my style.
That's it. Not everybody wants to sit down and write the Castle of fucking Otranto, and that's fine, because if I tried it would suck. But actually, Chloe, just to add to what you were saying, I think there's also something about motherhood. And I mean, obviously it's a strange one for me to talk about because I am a mother, you know, I've got 2 kids, but equally lots of people don't want kids, lots of women don't want kids, lots of people aren't mothers, don't identify as mothers. You know, it's a really offensive assumption, I think, that as a woman you will sit down and write about motherhood and that will be part and parcel of you as a horror writer. But it's absolutely, I think, sometimes the assumption that people have when they read it, and also when they talk to you about stuff, you know, that there will be an aspect of motherhood in there, that there'll be something about children, that there'll be a protective element to female protagonists. And I think, I mean, men write that too, you know what I mean? It's not like there's an assumption that it's just women that write it, but textually, I think there's that assumption that if women are involved at the production or the consumption stage, then there'll be an added sensitivity around children and around mothering.
My mothers will eat their children.
You should write a book where a mother eats the children.
Yep.
It's out there. I haven't read it, but I feel like I've read someone's review or something like that.
When I was thinking about this, I was thinking, there is the expectation that we all write gothic horror or haunted house stories. And there are some women that do that really, really well, like is it Darcy Coates?
Darcy Coates, she does it.
She does that really well. But the other thing I also thought about is there may be this expectation that we all write paranormal romance.
Oh yes, isn't it,
you know,
basically like a lot of people assume that?
Oh, I've just got the thing.
Yeah, it's just like limited minutes. Whee!
3 minutes, brilliant. We'll edit that bit out that time. What was I saying?
No, we're all going to be Twilight people. We're all going to write a lovely romance.
And young adult actually as well. That it will be that there'll be a sort of teenage, and I mean that probably ties in with the romance element and the, you know, the kind of gothic fantasy bits. But that it will be pitched towards younger, more impressionable kind of, you know what I mean, rather than it being hardcore shit for people that want to see an evisceration.
Yep.
Yeah, and also the thing that it will lean more towards romance than anything scary. As well.
Also the assumption that it can't be both. I mean, I think about someone like Sonora Taylor, who is basically writing about, you know, like gore and fucking often simultaneously. And it, you know what I mean? Like there's a short story of hers in Not Seeing Things in thingy. Oh God, I read it really recently. A short story collection. Most recent. Little Paranoias. And there's one story in that is basically horror erotica, and it literally like within a sentence, and you know what I mean. It's not fluffy gothic. No. it's hardcore both.
Yeah, she also did the for Christmas, didn't she?
Yes, the
Krampus thing,
story.
yeah.
I love that.
I haven't read it yet, I must admit. I've got a Krampus backlog.
Oh, it's great. It's only very short. I read it in about like one sitting. I was just like, oh, this is amazing. Brilliant. Luke's stunned now. She's like, Krampus erotica, what's this?
So I've got to read this now.
It's a lot
I've
of
been
it.
missing
You want
out.
to like clear your diary for a bit.
Oh, brilliant.
Okay, so now's the fun part. Give us some of your women in horror book recommendations. So Villimey, if we start with you again.
Well, I've been more. I'm actually reading Nat's book right now.
Yay!
That was so awesome.
I know. I'm only 100 pages in, but I'm so intrigued and I want to know more. And I'm like, I already have these ideas going on in my head, especially because you mentioned Iceland in the book. And
I was going to say there's a bit of Iceland in it.
Seriously, every time any kind of media like showcases Iceland, I'm like, Iceland!
It's amazing. One of the best things I found out when I was researching it was how closely connected bits of Scotland and Iceland are.
Yeah, we are.
It's amazing. It's like there's a huge kind of like cross-pollination over like 1,000 years.
Yeah, it is. I think I might even have some ancestors either from Scotland or from like Ireland.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So I was like, yee, really kidding.
Sorry. Sidebar, but very excited.
So far into the book, I definitely recommend it. And
5 stars from me.
yeah, I think you've gotten like 5 stars everywhere. So I'm like, so excited. I also definitely recommend Beverly Lee's Vampire Suspense series, the making of Gabriel Davenport. I haven't finished the last book yet, but like so far they're so good. And even when I was reading the second book when I was in Romania, it really compelled me just to go find the next art store, but buy some like colors. And I'm like, I need to draw, and I gave her like her first fan art.
Awesome.
And
You do realize you have to share that now.
I'll have to go into my closet and I can share it on Twitter later on, definitely.
Yeah.
Cool.
But then I've just been on like an anthology binge lately, so I definitely recommend the women writers that were in was it Britannica Diabolica?
That's right.
Oh yeah, the NHS one.
Yes.
Yep.
And definitely what we're representing here with Candicia Press, with the women of horror anthologies, like the second anthology that I read, it was so good. And like I said, my favorite story, and it still sticks with me, and I keep telling people about this story, is The Holes by
Yes.
Oh yeah, I haven't read that story, but I've read about that. I've read loads about that.
It's so good, and it sticks with me because it deals with phobias, especially like a phobia of holes. I have a couple of phobias, but I don't have that one. And after reading that one, I was like, I'm so glad I'm not afraid of this, because
oh my god, everything's got a fucking hole in it. I'm just looking around my room now, and it's everything.
Terrifying. It's so debilitating having something like that. I can't even imagine.
It is, yeah. So this one, like, it still sticks with me, and I'm like, you have to read this story. It's short, but it's so disturbing. It's so good.
She is so talented. Yeah.
Yes,
Really.
so she has basically become like one of my favorite women horror writers at the moment, and I can't wait to read more from her.
Oh, brilliant.
So yay, Ari Busby!
Yeah.
Like in here.
Nat,
So,
who
Nat,
would you recommend to everyone?
So it's funny actually, because I realized last year I mostly read women, like not even really by design. It's just that I did. So in a way, it's sort of easier to just think of the last few things that I read. But, you know what I mean, like that. So so Hayley Piper's Women as Kings is absolutely fucking incredible. That one's really
and I can't wait to start reading it.
It's so good. I mean, obviously I'm always fucking singing Hayley's praises because she's amazing, but like it's very rare, you know, that you read something and it makes you look differently at the whole construction of the world. And it's like, fucking hell, it cosmic horror in the most mind-bending sense. Like, absolutely loved it. I'm trying to think what else. So I finished We Are Wolves. I need to review it actually. We Are Wolves lately and recently, and that was amazing. In fact, one of Laurel's stories in that is, you know, that I don't want to spoil it actually. One of Laurel's stories in there about women feeling compelled to smile is probably one of the best short stories I've ever read. Absolutely loved it.
It is. Yes, it's beautiful. Yeah.
Oh, good. I mean, Laurel generally I love, and I mean, Crossroads is amazing. And I know everybody always talks about Crossroads, but actually my favorite of hers is Whispers in the Dark. And I really, really like what she did with that, with the sort of blending like police procedural and like full on horror. And it's like, which direction are you going with them? And it turns out she's going in both directions, and it works beautifully. So yeah, Laurel Hightower, Whispers in the Dark for me, absolutely. It literally is just me thinking like the last few things I read in like October, November, December. Sonora Taylor, Little Paranoias, amazing. In fact, the second Candisha one I've got lined up ready to read, which I'm quite excited about. Actually, and Villimey, I've got your Nocturnal Blood as well, which I'm excited about. I still haven't fucking read it. I've got like this massive TBR that I've made no dent in whatsoever. But I think probably, to be honest, a better question for me would be like, so which men have you enjoyed this shit? You know what I mean? Like, I can name about 5 of them, but then all the others are women.
Nice.
That is. And when I was thinking about this, I was quite almost embarrassed to find the lack of women that I've read. And again, it hasn't been for any reason. It's just when I look at my shelves, I've got like Jonathan Jans, Glenn Rolfe, Hunter Shea, Tim Meyer, and it's like, oh, and all my favourite writers are male, and it's just, I kind of feel a bit bad about that really, but I do read women as well, and I'm going to make more.
Well, also, I've got good news for you. The thing I'm writing at the minute is so fucking splattered that you will love it. So
yeah, and that is possibly why as well, because with that whole kind of, but I'm discovering more and more amazing women, and one of them is Kenzie Jennings.
Oh, yes, such good things about that.
Okay, so Kenzie is just absolutely amazing. She's such a wonderful lady as well. But this is, so if anybody like is out there thinking, can women write splatterpunk? Yes, they bloody can. And this is amazing because it's obviously one of the Death's Head Press splatterpunk westerns, but it's a slasher. So you've got both of the, and slashers are one of my favourite subgenres anyway. So I highly recommend this. And Sadie Hartman, Mother Horror, is doing a read along of Kenzie's other book, which is called Reception, which is cannibal horror. So that should be amazing as well, about a wedding that all goes a bit wrong and somebody ends up eating everyone and all that kind of stuff. So
you know what I like.
Yeah, but Kenzie actually lives in Orlando, so you know, she's like literally walking distance almost from Disney, which is one of my other massive loves in life. So we have a lot to talk about, and hopefully, fingers crossed, when we next get over there, we're going to meet up, which will be so nice.
Amazing.
This is another one of my all-time favorite books, and another lady who is just amazing. Those Who Came Before by J.H. Moncrief. This is, if you haven't read it, I don't want to say too much about it, but it touches on Native American culture. Ooh. And it's a little bit like Whispers in the Dark in that it's police procedural mixed with the horror, and it is just absolutely brilliant, really good. 100% recommend that one. And it's one that keeps you guessing all the way through as well. And she was very some of the stuff like on the traditional side with the Native Americans, just heartbreaking, absolutely, because it's, you know that that's true. And that's kind of the thing within horror. I can read about people eating people in the werewolves and be like, yeah, that's brilliant. But when it's something that really actually happened, I mean, obviously the book's fiction, but you know that actually happened.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, when it touches upon like what's happening in real life, it really sticks with you.
It does, that's right. So that is absolutely brilliant. Her voice is just gorgeous. And then I got this yesterday and and I'm so excited. The new CJ Tudor.
Oh, amazing.
I'm absolutely love Kaz. She is, again, just such a wonder, and she was one of the first people I actually connected with in the horror community, and she is just so down to earth. I mean, obviously she's, you know, she's in the big five and all of that kind of stuff, and she sells millions. I mean, she's blurbed by Stephen King, Lee Child, and Harlan Coben, and you're like, wow. But she is just such a really nice and approachable person. And yeah, I started it this morning, so I'm like 30 odd pages in, but this is so editing by CJ, but this is her new one, and so far so good.
Awesome.
So they're my recommendations.
I'm totally starting on her. I'm going to start at the beginning, I think. But like,
yes, because we were talking about it. Well,
yeah,
that's right. Yes. Yeah.
Not going to help my TBR, but I am there. Yeah.
Yeah, you need to start with this one, which is, again, brilliant. Up there, all of her stuff is, again, her voice is just great. And again, so with the other two, Kinsey and Holly are obviously American, but Kaz is British, so sometimes that makes a bit of a difference as well. Because when I was trying to set apart from us, and obviously not a bit of me, but you know, when you're thinking of British female horror writers, I'm looking at, and most of the people I've got up on there are American as well.
Yeah, oh, totally. And I think, I mean, sometimes I was banging on about this with Ross and Kev, even like last week, like the, you know, this sort of horror of things creeping into the mundane. So like you've got your kind of ordinary life, and then you've got horror kind of creeping in at the edges of it. And there's not actually, I mean, gender notwithstanding, other than Clive Barker, and even Clive Barker got a bit more American as time went on. Do you know what I mean? Like early Barker is pretty British, and then suddenly it's all LA all the way. But like, other than him, and I mean, obviously like your Ramsey Campbells and that, you know, so then there's an English sort of British rather sensibility. It's pretty American across the board, I think, and the kind of everyday creepiness is often a very American everyday creepiness. So actually, I definitely think, you know, the more people, but also the more women writing everyday creepiness into British, what would be to me into recognizable British settings.
Yeah, I think, for example, like with Adam Neville's story, The Ritual.
Yeah.
When it happens in Sweden, and then you're like, you know, there are creepy things happening in the forest in Sweden, you guys. Folklore galore. You can't explore it. So I was really happy when you saw, like, hey, look at that. There's Scandinavian representing here as well. So
yeah,
definitely branch out a little bit.
But also, I mean, even something like, you know, like The Right One In. Obviously, it's not Icelandic, but it feels like it's sort of touching on that kind of Scandi noir thing, while still being very horrific.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Sorry, I digress again.
Have you done all your recommendations?
Yes.
Cool. Right. Sit comfortably. I've got a list.
Hey.
Okay.
Yeah, I
did. I'm really prepared. I've got everything written down. My first one is one of the first kind of indie writers I got into is S.E. England, and she had a story in Diabolica Britannica.
Yeah, I got it wrong. Of course I did.
She had a book out, I think it was a couple of years ago, called Hidden Company, and I really enjoyed that one. Had to put a Darcy Coates one in my list, which was The Haunting of Ashburn House. I've actually read that one twice. Alexis Henderson, The Year of the Witching, which was one of my favourite books of last year. That's really, really good. Not particularly not particularly gory or anything, but really creepy. You just got that sense that something's creeping up on you. Gemma Amor, Dear Laura.
Yes,
definitely. Dear Laura, wow.
Yeah. I don't know if the rest of you have read it, but anything like where there's pulling teeth, it just gets me.
Same.
I can read about people getting torn apart, but if things go in your eye or your teeth get pulled out.
Same.
Can I recommend that everybody doesn't read my next book, actually? There's a bit of teeth going on
with it, so yeah, I'll be all right.
But you know, I hate when people get teeth pulled out or stuff goes into their eyes. But in literally almost all of my books, I write about someone losing an eye or something happening to their eye. So I don't know what that's about.
That's one of your niches, that kind of stuff. But they say write what you know and write what scares you, don't they? So there you go. That's why it feels authentic, because you're writing and going,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah, oh my god, it's such a primal fear, isn't it? You know, like the tooth thing, especially. So, like, you know, Edward, like when he was writing as Edward Lunn, like he'd in something like Life After Dane, that's about somebody that just pulls out people's teeth when he's murdering them. You know what I mean? Like, it's such a, like, you're reading it and you're sort of shuddering along because it's such a deep-rooted fear. I think on some level everybody thinks like shit,
deep-rooted.
Teeth, like,
Yep.
you are. Quiet again.
Okay, any more?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yep.
Next one. Alma Katz Do the Hunger.
Oh,
Yes.
I love that
I
one.
love that book. Yeah.
I've still got to read The Deep. That's on my list
It's
to
on
get to at some
well.
point.
I mean, Titanic on horror. It sounds amazing.
What's not to like? Caitlin Starling, The Luminous Dead. That was really cool. It's very like isolated. It's a young woman. She goes on an expedition in some mines somewhere, and there's these horrible creatures, and the only contact she has with anyone else is through a radio comm set.
That's
And
terrifying.
and the other woman is not quite as she seems to begin with, and yeah, it's worth a read. Another one was, I'm going to butcher her name, Anya Alborn, the Shuddering. It's a nice creepy winter kind of thing with monsters. And that was it for now.
Nice.
So yeah, just a couple.
Awesome. I'm writing all of them down.
Yes.
Yeah, the
Next
creepy
question.
mine one sounds horrific. That's one of my fears, and one of the scariest films. It's one of my favorite films, but one of the scariest films I've ever seen is The Descent.
Yeah.
You guys seen that? Yeah. And obviously that's an all-female cast, so it's another brilliant kind of women in horror sort of thing. But yeah, and the monsters and things in it don't bother me in the slightest. It's being in those tunnels and underground and in those holes.
And not being able to see properly what's near you, and just hearing stuff.
Claustrophobic, but as soon as you see this and like the walls suddenly start to pull and getting smaller, you're like, no, I'm good. I'm here. Not going on an ice cave escapade. Hell no.
I think it's the same thing that's, you know, like set. So there's a load of stuff set on the London Underground. And like, I mean, I don't know whether I'm especially sensitive to that because that used to be my commute. You know what I mean? So I'm like sitting there on the Northern Line at like 8:15 in the morning thinking like, please don't eat me, whoever's opposite me. But like, there's something about, you know, like being trapped underground, but also being trapped in a small metal tube underground.
Yep.
And I think there's probably
there's nowhere to go.
Yeah, it's just fucking horrible on every level. It's like multiple layers of claustrophobia and possible death.
Have you seen the movie The Creep?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
This touches upon that exactly. And
that.
Like, nope, I'm good. I'll walk upstairs.
Yeah, I'll just walk across London.
Fine with that. Fine. Just get mowed down on the Euston Road. Still better way to go. Do you know what I mean?
Okay, so next question. What got you into horror? Villimey?
Well, I guess I gotta thank my brother for that. My older brother, he's 6 years older than me. And he is an avid horror fan, just basically from the beginning, I think. And he introduced me to horror when he was supposed to be babysitting me. I think I was around 7 at the time, and he got me to bed. But then, of course, he got his friends over, and they decided to watch a horror film. And I felt left out, so I decided to creep, behind the sofa.
Yeah.
To see what they were watching. And apparently, they were watching Aliens. And the moment I peeked from the sofa was the scene when the chest burster goes out.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I remember, I think I gasped or I screamed, and my brother was like, "Hey, what the? You're supposed to be asleep." But then he didn't really like push me or anything, and he was like, well, if you want to watch, you can watch. And I was just like sitting there traumatized, like, is this
But well, you've seen that bit now.
And then again, the similar scene. I think it was around the same age. Maybe 2 years after that. I was watching Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
Oh yeah.
And that has a scene as well where, you know, he goes into the heart, into the chest.
Yes.
So
Oh, I love that film. I need to watch that again.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite films. And he again was supposed to be babysitting me, and he was like, "Cover your eyes. You're not supposed to see that." And I'm like, "Yeah, shut up. I'm watching this." And of course, I did the same to my little brother, who's 2 years younger than me. And when I was supposed to be babysitting him, we watched that movie, and I was like, "If you want, you can cover your eyes, but maybe watch this and be traumatized with me." Simple love.
Join me.
And yeah, so basically Alien and Indiana Jones is what got me into horror. But then when it came to reading it, my brother had like the old, I wouldn't say the first version, but like an old version of Bram Stoker's Dracula. And it had like illustrations in it. And of course, you know, when you're a kid, illustrations are everything. And I just was really immersed into the stories. So after that, I'm like, I need more horror. So I started reading Frankenstein and things, what was it called? Tales to Tell in the Dark? Or was something like that? I think so. It had like the scary covers and the illustrations.
Scary stories to tell in the dark.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, I read that, and then of course I went over to like Goosebumps and stuff. But I realized at that time that I was far gone into reading stuff like Goosebumps. I'm like, I need something more hardcore. I think like Stephen King and stuff. And then afterwards, I'm like, I might be able to write something like this. Maybe, yeah, I'll try it.
What about you, Nat?
So I think, yeah, I mean, it's probably, I was going to say it was movies for me as well, but it might have been telly. I mean, so the first thing for me, I don't know whether this will ring any bells because I don't know whether it would have been shown, but when I was a kid, I think you guys will probably remember this. There was a Tales of the Unexpected that got shown a lot, and it was the woman killing her husband with a leg of lamb and then cooking the lamb and then serving it to the policeman that came to investigate.
I remember
and that. Have you come across that? So I mean, there's a Roald Dahl short story about it as well. It's obviously Tales of the Unexpected are like mostly initially is short stories, but like I remember watching that. I must have been about 6, and it was obviously made in the 70s, and it must have been shown because that would have been, well, I guess like the mid 80s, and I was just watching it, and it really fucking freaked me out, and I was like, Jesus Christ. And then there was something else on the telly that was a Jack the Jack the Ripper film with Michael Caine in it.
Yeah,
that I should not have been watching at all, and that came on, and yeah, God bless telly in the 80s. No watershed there. But, so I'm watching that, and that really really freaked me out. Around the same time, I started reading like Christopher Pike, and that sort of, you know, kind of, I suppose like what you'd think of now as young adult horror, but it wasn't necessarily called that then. But then fairly swiftly or sort of simultaneously, I started reading Stephen King. And I think my mum must have had a Stephen King compendium, you know, that one that was like Harry, Salem's Lot, and The Shining. It was like all 3 of them bound up.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting up sort of 3 nights in a row just reading that, like reading a book every night, staying up all fucking night, terrifying myself. I mean, like Salem's Lot, you know, the bit with the brother coming back and like, so scared.
Wall, like on the window, like tap tap.
Yeah, like oh god, and the rotting as well. I think with that, you know, like the vampires, they weren't like hot, sexy vampires. They were like decaying.
Yep.
Anyway, so
terrifying,
so basically like that, and I think after that I was like, and actually I think Roald Dahl more generally, I mean, deeply problematic in every fucking sense, but also the twist and the tail stuff.
Yeah,
like really. Everything sort of weird, and the weirdness building. So something like The Landlady, where it's like, you know, something weird's going on, and then suddenly last page it's like, oh yeah, she's killed them all and stuffed them, and you know what I mean, something like that. And I remember really strongly, even as a kid, wanting to be able to write twists in the tale.
Mm-hmm.
And I think horror is kind of the logical extension of that, because it's the biggest twist and the most sort of horrific tale.
Yeah, I remember also reading a lot about like the Grimm tales.
Oh yes.
Yeah, I mean, I read a lot of that, and I read the ones that were not censored. So
the proper ones, the original ones.
yeah, I mean, they're the original ones. I mean, they were the best ones. And then suddenly, when I went to school and we had to read like them again, we got the censored one. So I was like, no, he got eaten. Like,
Oh yeah, they are terrifying.
Like, he was a cannibal and he ate him. So what's happening? Why is this not in this book?
Oh, there's some pages missing.
Why would you censor the good stuff?
Has anyone read the original Little Mermaid?
Yes.
No, actually.
Yeah. So the bit when she becomes a human and she's like walking across, like her feet are literally are disintegrating. She's like walking on like bloody stumps and whatnot. And then at the end, she kills herself.
Yep.
Commits suicide.
Jesus Christ! I did not know this.
You didn't know?
Oh my God! I've seen that mermaid statue in Copenhagen. Nobody told me that.
Are you kidding me? Hans Christian Andersen, he hated children.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Oh my God!
He just wanted them traumatized.
I've got a picture of me next to that mermaid going like, oh my God!
Yeah, the original stories are they're the worst kind of terrifying ever.
Yep.
But
Awesome.
the original Little Red Riding Hood's quite terrifying as well.
Yep.
There's no cutting open and being saved and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but there's so many additions.
That makes no sense at all, because once somebody's been eaten, I mean, you cut open the wolf and you're not going to get the full ground. Do you know what I mean? Sorry. Anyway.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, so what got me into horror? A couple of things. The main thing being my dad, who was always into it as well. So if there was even things like Carry On Screaming, and
yes!
sort of, movies like that. That's the kind of thing, the Hammer horrors and whatnot. That's what we always had on the telly. And the Stephen King's Salem's Lot was the very first horror I ever read, and I was about 9 or 10, and that was his and that kind of thing. Similar to with the babysitting thing as well. If my mum went out, my dad would put on something like Freddy and whatnot and just let me stay up and watch it, like 8 or 9, going, woohoo, this is amazing. But also, and I think it kind of went hand in hand, was the fact that I always wanted to be a police officer, like right from reception at school, when you're 4 and 5 and they're saying, what do you want to do? And you've got people going, I want to be a mummy. And I was like, I want to be a cop. So always watched a lot of crime, and especially true crime and all that kind of stuff, and always had that interest in the darker side of things. So it just seemed to be, again, a natural progression. The English was my favorite subject at school, so therefore, why don't I try writing? I know, why don't I try writing what I know, which is horror?
Yeah.
And also, I grew up in Somerset, and we have a lot of local legends and ghost stories and things like that. And there's a lot of Arthurian legend around there as well. And again, so going back to my dad, I can remember being sat on his lap and it'd be like, Dad, tell me a story. And it'd be like, oh, did I tell you about the time about? And it would always be a ghost story. And it might not necessarily have been something terrifying. One of my favorites was that his grandmother, so my great grandmother, yeah, something like that. I can't work it out. Used to be able to see a pig walking across the ceiling, a ghost of a pig.
Spider pig?
Which is, completely bizarre and just didn't make any sense whatsoever. But it was still a ghost story, and it was still, like the pig that had been on the farm, and she must have killed the pig or whatever. But at night she would be able to see the pig walking across the ceiling, and it was just, one of those things. Yeah. So I think, it's just like the whole fascination with, and then sort of I would move into the X-Files and all of those kind of things, through the teenage years. I've just always had that fascination with the darker side, and especially like the mysterious darker side. So I think, like you were saying, that like with those twists in the tale as well, always enjoyed anything like that. And even I'd say, like, my other passion is Disney. But my favourite rides at Disney are things like the Haunted Mansion and the Tower of Terror. I've always liked that, you know, they're my favourites, and the villains in the films and things.
Some of them get dark.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
Oh yeah.
properly. I was watching with Alex, my little girl, yesterday. I was watching Sleeping Beauty. Fucking hell. I mean, it's, you know, it's not a light escapade.
Like the Hunchback of Notre Dame, like that has
Yes.
one of the best villains ever, and the best villain death.
Yeah.
Even though it didn't even happen in Victor Hugo's book, I prefer that to anything. It was amazing.
Yep.
Oh, sorry, I've just remembered some. Can I? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, they were so bold
Yeah.
in, like, you know, portraying, you know, because you usually don't see that in Disney films, like this
Yep.
sexual attraction.
Yes. Yes.
So you
Yeah.
you don't usually see that in other Disney films, but the way they portrayed it in him, it was super creepy. But at the same time, like, yeah, definitely appreciate that, because, you know, people have that.
Also, though, I mean, Ursula, without wanting to go off on a tangent, Ursula in The Little Mermaid, I was thinking this the other day, sort of weirdly sexual.
Weird
Yes.
sexual and drag queenie, I love it.
Yeah, oh my God.
Exactly,
I mean, I honestly, I know that obviously, like, she's not voiced by Harvey Fierstein, but you could imagine it, you know what I mean? Like, that would be so fucking good. I would pay to see that. But, like, there's something, I was listening, again, I've got all the Disney soundtracks, obviously, and, like, I was listening to Poor Unfortunate Souls the other day when I was running Alex a bath, and, like, it's very sexual, you know, it's like,
Yeah.
there's something going on with her and Ursula, you know what I mean? And it's not next, but it's there. Oh, sorry. Anyway, that was not what I was going to say. Sorry, I just remembered another creepy thing from when I was a kid. I used to get told, whoever fucking told me this, they fucking traumatized me. I used to get told about the 9 o'clock horses. I don't know, did you guys ever read that when you, I don't know whether it's a Leicester thing or?
No.
So, there's a story that I don't know if it's like my gran or my uncle or something. He used to say that if you weren't in bed and asleep by 9 o'clock, the 9 o'clock horses would come and take you away. And the 9 o'clock horses, you could hear the horses outside, and you'd hear like hoof beats and hoof beats and hoof beats. And then by the time the hoof beats were really close, it was kind of over for you. So
Whoa.
go sleep. You know what I mean? But that, I definitely remember being a bit traumatized by that. So
Yeah, I
like,
can imagine that,
sorry, anyway.
Influence Salt Blood at all? Did that influence Salt Blood at all?
I
The
feel like it
hoofbeat?
did, because I've never been on a horse in my life. Do you know what I mean? And
Oh, there we go. Yep.
there's horses all over the shop there. But yeah, that properly freaked me out. But it could be like local folklore, you know what I mean? Because I've not heard it in other places. But yeah, don't
I'm
tell
going
you.
to Google this after.
Yeah, don't seriously. 9 o'clock horses, like. If it is Leicester folklore, it is the only good thing that Leicester has put out into the universe. So. Oh my God, I'm going to get some sort of cut that. I'm going to get. Sorry. Moving on, Luke, come on, let's do this.
So have you finished yours, Janine?
Yes.
Cool.
You're
For me, like on this podcast, we've mentioned this before. I watched The Gate when I was really little and read Salem's Lot. So those were like my gateways. The Gate was the gateway into horror.
Yeah.
But when I was younger than that, I was always into like the darker side of cartoons and stuff. So I'd watch He-Man and be rooting for Skeletor the whole time. Or Star Wars. And
All the others, who wouldn't root for Skeletor? I mean,
and he
even
had the
the
coolest outfit.
thing about the series, I was like, what kind of thing are you gonna today?
It was actually really good.
And also, like when I was 5 or 6, I really enjoyed watching Murder, She Wrote for some bizarre reason.
Murder, She Wrote. Yeah.
Sunday night, have a bath, go out, watch Murder, She Wrote.
I'm convinced that she was the murderer, really.
Yeah, makes sense. There's no Occam's razor, do you know what I mean? There's no other reason that they keep happening where she is.
Why did no one pick up on that?
Yeah. It's because she knew all the police, isn't it? She was like in there with all the different sheriffs. No wonder.
So yeah, that's why I'm a bit weird.
I like it.
Right, so the next question we've got is, what inspires you to write? So for Villimey, that's your nocturnal series we want to talk about.
Yeah.
Nat, talk about Salt Blood, and Janine, talk about The Invitation. So if we start with Villimey, so I've just got tangled up in my headphone cord.
So the reason I decided to write Nocturnal Blood and basically the series was that I was getting a little bit tired of people associating vampires with the paranormal romance. You know,
Yeah.
Twilight. I hate you, Twilight. Why did you ruin vampires for me? And vampires for the rest of the world. But I digress. But so I kind of wanted to, you know, go back to the roots when vampires were kind of revered as this kind of beasts things that are so dangerous that you wouldn't want to really meet in the dark alley or something like that.
Yeah.
Like they were this kind of things that look human, feel human, but once they get near you, you're basically dead. So so basically Dracula was like a huge element for me to go back to that, as well as Blade's vampires, because you can basically see that they're just walking among people and they look like normal people, but then when you drag you to a club and you're sprayed with blood, something else is there. So I wanted that, and I also, what really compelled me as well is over the years I had been reading a lot of like young adult novels, and what really annoyed me was the thing that the heroine always kind of had to be this sassy badass chick, like right from the start. And it just kind of occurred to me, like, not everyone is like that, you know. You can't really go into this kind of situation and be super blasé about it and be like, okay, sure, I'll just tackle it with my fists and stuff and my snarkiness. And it kind of, I also want to kind of blend into my own experiences to it, because with my main character Leia, she deals with anxiety, like a lot of anxiety and OCD, and she is kind of based off of myself, because I have anxiety as well, and I also struggle a little bit with OCD. It's not completely the same as what she has, but I have it as well. So I wanted like to show people that even though in horror you can have a fragile human being dealing with these kind of horrific events, but still come on top feeling a little bit stronger. So that was basically the reason I'm hoping that I'm portraying with the rest of the books that I'm writing.
Cool.
Awesome.
And Nat?
So I mean, two things really with mine. So the first is that, I mean, obviously I wanted to write something kind of horrific for quite a long time, and I really liked the idea of placemaking. So in my day job, a lot of the stuff that I do is sort of around analysis of space, for example, and like what space means and what it sort of signifies and all the rest of it. And obviously something like an island, so like with Saltblood, obviously it's set on an island. If it's a remote enough island, then you can kind of make it whatever you want it to be, you know what I mean? So it's almost a sort of world building in miniature. So I really, really wanted to do that. The other thing though that I really wanted to do was get basically lesbians front and center. One of the things that I find endlessly frustrating from a representation, I mean, there's lots of things I find endlessly frustrating from a representation standpoint, actually, but like one of the things I find frustrating as a gay woman is that almost everything that I read does not have me in it. I mean, another thing that I find slightly, that I'm sort of complicatedly multiracial, and you don't get a lot of that either. You get a lot of like, you know, I am this, or I am that, or I am white, or I am not, you know what I mean? Or I am black, or I'm Indian, or whatever, but you don't get much kind of mix, you know what I mean? Like people being mixed in a complicated way that isn't necessarily an identity definer.
You're type 1 and that's it.
Yeah, essentially. Like, and I think all the way, like with a lot of fiction, there is a tendency to write in bold strokes. But anyway, so specifically with Saltblood, just sort of lack of lesbian representation that really, really irked me, specifically in horror, but also in kind of, I mean, I write crime as well, specifically kind of in crime. It's difficult because there's obviously some genres are full of lesbian representation. So something like romance, you know, there's loads of it, but I don't really read. I mean, I read a bit of romance, but it's not really you know, I'm going into a bookstore, it's not the section I'm gravitating to. You know what I mean? Like I read some of it, and actually, you know, a couple of friends of mine write some really lovely romance, which I will absolutely read, but it's not, I'm always going to want somebody to be eviscerated somewhere. You know what I mean? Like if it's not happening by page 200, I'm going to get a bit antsy. So there was that, you know what I mean? There was that sense of actually, I want to read what I want to read, but I also want to see myself in it. And I mean, I said this to Ross actually the other week, but like, it's, yeah, that thing, like if you want something to exist in the world enough, we'll just fucking write it. You know what I mean? Like Toni Morrison thing, like if you want it, then write it. So I kind of thought, well, I want it, it's not there, what am I going to do? You know what I mean? So I think most of what I write springs from that, like, oh shit, it doesn't exist, there's a gap, I should probably plug it because I want to read it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think it has something, I think most of us usually have that, like you want to write what you want to read.
Completely. And it's frustrating as fuck, because I mean, to be completely honest, like I'm so fucking busy, I've got no time. You know, I've got 2 young kids, we are stuck at home in the plague, and you know what I mean, like there's a lot going on, and I've run a business. Like if the stuff that I wanted to read existed, I probably wouldn't write, to be honest. I probably would just like sit and have a read in my downtime, small as it is. But like there's this sort of compulsion to make the thing that you want to read exist. No, it's not really even for other people, it's just that like it's frustrating for me to not find stuff that I want. You know what I mean? Anyway, Janine.
Yeah.
Mine's quite difficult to talk about because just looking at the invitation, which was my story, which was in Graveyard Smash. When Jill asked me to write something for that, I went very literally with something set in a graveyard. And it's very hard for me to say too much about it without giving away the massive twist that happens at the end.
Yeah.
But again, going back to writing that kind of thing with a twist, that is, I knew that was what I wanted to do. I had this idea in my mind, which was basically, it revolves around a girl called Amber who's at high school. She's not necessarily one of the most popular girls, but she gets an invitation to the big Graveyard Smash party on Halloween, and then what transpires from there, and there's kind of a mysterious boy involved in it as well. And it was literally, and I quite often with open calls, I interpret it as I say, quite literally. I'll look at the call and I think, oh, okay, that's what I'm going to write about. And for me, sometimes I find that easier. I don't know if it's because I procrastinate so much, but if I've got a call and a theme and a deadline, I find it easier to do that rather than when I'm writing something for myself. So, for example, this like slasher novel that I'm writing at the moment, I've probably done less than 1,000 words because there's no deadline on it. It's something for me to sit down and write when I want to. And then I sit down and I think to myself, oh, there's so many other things I could do now. Whereas if I'm told, right, you need to do this story now and you've got like 2 weeks to do it, I'll be like, you know, tap, and I can knock out like 10,000 words. But it's difficult when I haven't got that. And that's just me in my entire life as well. If the laundry is not overflowing, I'm not one of those people. So yeah, and going back to reading what you want, you know, writing what you want to read, I think, because The Invitation was my very first accepted story as well, so that's kind of like going way back to last year. But a lot of the stuff I write now, as we were talking about at the beginning, is way more extreme because that's what I want, that's what I read. I want to read about that kind of stuff, and I find that my work's got darker and darker and darker as it goes on as well, which is fun.
Love it. Yay! I want to see how dark you get. I love it.
For me, oh, you finished? Sorry.
Yeah.
Cool.
I finished.
For me, it's pretty much escapism. So I had someone who's read a few of my books email me and say, what I love about your books, Lou, is that it would never happen in real life. I just have like ridiculous monsters and things like that. I did a short story for Janine just before Christmas where she got hunted down by a giant mutant slug in a tunnel.
Didn't you
I need to read that so badly.
Didn't you write one story about a killer unicorn?
No, I haven't done a unicorn. I did a story
about the killer unicorn Is that what you're thinking about, maybe?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it was, because I was like, kill a unicorn. That's something.
All of these, I would read them.
So for me, it's total escapism. And also at the moment, I've got this weird obsession for medieval weaponry. So I'm trying to incorporate that into everything I'm writing.
If you haven't,
Oh, that's an interesting.
if you're not following Marcus Vance on Twitter, you definitely should. He's like the weapons expert.
Okay, I'll look him up. So I see something sharp and pointy, and I think, oh, what could I do with that?
Generation of women raised on Buffy, innit?
Okay, I'm aware that time's getting on, so we've got like one question, and then where can people find you online? So, what is your writing process like? Let's start with Villimey again.
I'm basically almost like Janine when it comes to this. Like, if I have a deadline, then I will just throw everything else away. I'll just throw my cats away. I'll throw my husband away, lock him up in a room, and be like, I'm busy. I'm gonna write. I need to finish this. Especially when Gabino Iglesias had this whole dark anthology, and I didn't have a story at all. But when he says like, okay, you have 2 weeks, I'm like, I can do this. So I just sat down and took my notebook, and yeah, for those of you who don't know, I write everything by hand. Like all of my, like this is a notebook that I use for all of my short stories, and it's like everything is written.
That's the question. Do you write in English or Icelandic?
English.
So obviously, I mean, I know the books come out in English, but I didn't know whether you wrote in Icelandic first and then sort of translated.
Oh dear God, no. I mean, I'm so embarrassed to say this, but like my native language, like Icelandic, is shit. I mean, I can read, and I'm basically a master when it comes to not grammar, but like to spelling. Like I know all the spelling because like it was hammered into me when I was a kid. But when it comes to Icelandic grammar, I'm like, so wait, this is not conjugated like this, like in English? And they're like, no. I'm like, oh shit. So I might need to get like a re-education of Icelandic grammar again if I want to write in Icelandic, because a lot of people are like, why don't you write in Icelandic? I'm like, because it's shit. That's why. So yeah, I write everything in English because for some reason I have this crazy theory that I might have been like adopted from either England or America. My parents are denying it, of course, but you know. Yes. So, and well, because I was raised on American television, so that might be right. Might be the reason. Cartoon Network for the win, you know. So yeah, I write everything in my notebook, and I usually don't give myself like a time frame, like unless like there's a deadline, but. Right now, because I'm self-published, I'm kind of happy that I don't have that kind of deadline. So because that would kind of really stress me out, and especially because you're not the only one working on this, on your story or on your book. You have your own, you have a cover designer. You also have someone doing the formatting if you're not doing it yourself. I can't do it myself, so I tell someone else to do it, and so you're always like kind of having to have that everything under control. And as long as I'm not like putting this like I'm gonna publish this in 6 months, that would probably kill me. I try to be kind of mellow but at the same time organized. So if I manage to write, for example, in the morning 100 words, 500 words, I'm happy about it. I'm not going to be like the ones, I'm trying not to beat myself down when it comes to not writing at all, because you have a life. And you guys, for example, you're locked down, so you can't really do much. You can't really go to work. Well, unless doing it at home. I it's not, the situation is not as bad here in Iceland, so I am still like working full time. And there are just some days and when you just sit down and you're like not feeling it. So
Yeah.
you just you can't beat yourself down up not writing every single day, because you know, I wish it was possible, but sometimes you just gotta take what you can get. I don't think if I've answered that question correctly though. Did I?
Yeah.
I might have been vague.
And Nat, what about your writing process?
So funny enough actually, so as with Villimey, I have no time at all, ever. So my kids are 5 and 18, well no, 5 and 20 months now actually, and they're on slightly different sleep schedules, which means that I don't sleep. I mean, fucking look at my face, do you know what I mean? I don't sleep. And there's obviously I work, and work, because I've run an agency, work's been going a bit insane actually since lockdown. I've not been able to go anywhere. I used to travel quite a lot for work, so I used to go to the States quite a lot, and I haven't been anywhere obviously for a year. And so it's even the time, weirdly, when you commute, whether I was going into London on the train or whether I was going to LA and it was like 12 hours of just sitting, there's quite a lot of dead time.
Yeah.
And obviously some of the time you're working, but actually a lot of the time you can write or you can read or you can think. And one of the things that lockdown's done for me is basically eviscerate. I keep saying eviscerate, I can't fucking stop that. It's taken away my dead time. You know what I mean? Like I've got no dead time. Every single tiny amount of time now that I've got is accounted for. So
Yeah,
because
I'm feeling
of that,
this too.
oh fuck yeah. I mean, I think it's quite common. Like if you're stuck in the house, you're still working, but you can't do any, you know what I mean? You lose the little pockets of yourself that you used to have. And I mean, I really miss that, because I mean, so I live in Leicester. Going into London is about 55 minutes normally, which is actually weirdly less than my commute when I lived in. So I lived in very North London, commuted to West London, an hour and 45. Do you know what I mean? It's actually a much better commute from here. I used to have time there. I used to have pockets of time, a couple of hours a day off them. And so now there's nothing. So what I have to do now is, before I start to write anything, sit down and plot it to within an inch of its life. I mean, like chapter by chapter, scene by scene, beat by beat sometimes, you know. So I'll sit down before I do anything at all. I've got a really, really solid outline, because I can't not. I haven't got time to spin my wheels with it, you know what I mean? Like, because it's the time, if I try to do that, the time will just get eaten by something else, and then I'll forget it, and then it'll be a year later and it won't exist. The other thing I do is run quite a lot, which sounds daft, but like I run distance, and there's a lot of time in your head. It's actually the only time now that I get in my head. So I'll get an outline down, and then in the morning when I'm running, think about what I'm going to write that day, and then when I've got any tiny little bit of time, sit down and bang out as many words as I possibly can from that outline. But I think for me, as long as I've got the outline, I can get it done. I can normally get a book done in like a couple of months.
Yeah.
Whereas
I definitely agree with you, Nat. I need to have an outline. I can't be a complete pantser.
no, although I mean, what's funny is, so I'm doing two things. Writing at the moment. I'm writing a splatter western. And no, a lesbian splatter western. I think it's really important. That's my contribution to that subgenre. But I'm also, which is just me writing it in the way that I normally would, but I'm also collaborating with something on E. It's no longer than with E. So we're with Edward Lawton, or the guy that used to write as Edward Lawton, and we're about 17,000 words into a book. And he is a complete pantser. He's the most prolific writer I think I've ever met. He just writes constantly. But it's wonderful, because for somebody like me who wants to plot something to within an inch of its life, to then team up with E, who's like, fuck it, just write it, you know, let it come. It's actually been sort of revelatory, you know, to be able to just go with it and see what happens. So for all that I do want a really, really tight structure, actually, weirdly, when I'm teaming up with him, I can still bang it out, because I know then I can bat it back to him and it won't just sit somewhere in the ether. You know what I mean? So actually, I'm hopeful that in the future I can do more stuff like that. I mean, certainly when we finish the book that we're working on now, I want to collaborate with him again, and I'm absolutely loving him.
Nice. It's definitely nice. Well, I can't say for myself like that I'm a perfect, like a complete plotter. I'm more like I think it's called planter. It's such a weird.
Yeah,
I like that.
Weird word, but yeah. It's like I have to have like a skeleton structure, like an outline, chapter outline for what's going to happen in each chapter, and then it's just so reassuring to have it like that. And so when you start writing, you can almost go what you have, but then you also have this freedom of letting the characters do what they want to do. I mean, sometimes they won't even go what you outlined, and if it goes well, it's like, okay, sure, we can just keep with that. But it's always nice to be like, so for this chapter, I was going to do what now? Instead of being like, so I'm just gonna fart into the wind and see where it goes.
I love that. Oh, brilliant. So I've actually made myself some notes, and under this I put scatty as fuck. It's my writing process. It's terrible. I'm absolutely I'm a full-on pantser. Half the time I don't even know what I'm gonna write. I just sit there and like, it's gonna be gross and gory, and I'm gonna have some stuff going on and just see what happens. But then I guess, unlike you guys, I've only done short stories up until now. And maybe that's why I struggle with longer stuff. I don't know, because I would find it difficult. You know, with a longer work, you have to kind of at least know what direction you're going in, and you have to have your acts, you know, and your certain points and whatnot. And I would find that really difficult. So as I said, I've started this 80s slasher. And all I know is it's going to be set in the 80s, it's set in the UK, and I've started writing it. And I've got no plan whatsoever. I don't know who the slash is going to be. I haven't got a clue. Just write it. So we'll see. But that is me. That's my style. I have a vague idea, and then I find if I've planned something, it takes away my creativity in a way.
Yeah.
And
I was having an exact conversation with E actually last night.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's the beauty of pantsing, isn't it? Like, you get to just freestyle and you don't know, and actually you find out with everybody else what's going to happen.
Yeah.
I can see that. I can definitely see the appeal of that.
I surprise myself sometimes. I'm like typing away, wow, I never expected that. It came from here, but I never expected it.
And that person was the killer all along.
Yeah. Whoa! It's finally revealed itself, and I didn't know. How do you write, Lou, then?
Similar kind of thing. I prefer just to make it up as I go along, but I find that I do need like some kind of structure planned. So I kind of know what's going to happen in the beginning and what's going to happen at the end, and then I just fill in a big gap.
Yeah.
What I try to do.
Sorry.
When I'm sorry. Just as I'm about to write each day, when I do write each day, it's a bit all over the place at the moment. Before I start writing, I write a couple of lines to myself, like, this must happen, they must do this. But beyond that, it's all make it up as I go along.
It's always nice. It's a really good, nice thing to think about when you're, for example, writing short stories, that if you know what the ending is going to be, I think the rest is going to be fine.
Yeah, just work backwards.
Is it backwards as you? You need to know the beginning?
Yeah, I like to know, like the two bookends. I like the beginning and the end, and then the middle is just.
I think as
exploration.
I'm no expert, of course. I just recently started writing short stories, but I find in my case, like, if I know how it starts and how I'm going to end it, then the rest is basically easier to come with.
Yeah.
What I would say, actually, I find horror a lot easier to plot. So with crime stuff, if you don't know exactly what's going to happen in meticulous detail, you're fucked. You know what I mean? Like, I cannot imagine trying to sit down and trying to like write a crime novel through pants in it, because it just be like it'd be an incoherent mess. Whereas I think, like, with horror, you can, you know what I mean, you can be a bit more like, you can have scenes that are almost kind of hallucinatory, that don't necessarily have to have any logic to them, because the whole purpose of them is just to scare the shit out of whoever's reading it. Whereas I think with crime, it's like, oh, this piece A needs to fit into piece B, and do you know what I mean? And then like link back to something that happened 200 pages ago. And
I think
definitely.
I think horror kind of, if you want to describe horror, it kind of has, you have to link it to your sensories, like all the senses. While if you talk about crime books, it kind of has to do, everything has to do with logic. Like, if this doesn't make sense, then you're fucked.
Yeah, completely.
Okay.
The more fantasy side of things, do you have to plot more with that because of the world building? You know, is that harder to just kind of you know, fly by the seat of your pants when you're writing something, because of it all interlinks with your different worlds?
I think world building like is a really integral part of, you know, writing fantasy.
Yeah, with the
Kind of
stuff I'm
trying to
doing at the
introduce
moment,
something. Sorry. You're trying to do something like new that hasn't been done before, and that kind of really, you have to put a lot of emphasis on how the world is going to operate.
Yeah, for me, with the stuff that I'm doing at the moment, it's like horror fantasy, and I've invented this whole world where it all takes place. So I'm planning the world, and I'm planning the different species of monsters and places and things like that within it, but the story's quite freeform at the moment.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Cool. I think that's it. And I've just heard the doorbell go, so I may have to dash down. But so yeah, thank you all for joining us today. Before we go, could we just go around and say where people can find you online, and then I can go and see who's downstairs.
So shall I go first, of course? Since we're
Yep,
going around the table. You can find me. I'm really active on Twitter. So you can find the Twitter handle Villimey and with a capital S. They will write down how my name is written.
Yeah.
It's definitely not how we pronounce it. A lot of people have probably noticed by now. I'm also, well, it's not as active as before, but if you want to see some of my art, you can find that on my Instagram page. My Instagram handle is fangs.and.light. Kind of basically has to do with my characters that I'm writing, that I'm drawing for my series. I also started a YouTube channel. Can't believe it that I did that. Where I'm reviewing books, and I'm basically preferring to review indie books and indie horror or any small presses, just to get the word out and stuff. And I'm also doing other stuff like doing author readings. I just did a video where I'm reading a passage from my own book. Hopefully I didn't butcher that, even though I mispronounced 2 words that I had read a little bit beforehand. The YouTube channel is called Fanged Pipsqueak Reads. I chose Pipsqueak because it's a funny word and I'm small, but you don't want to mess with me. So yeah, and if you're interested in reading about my vampire horror series, you can find them on Amazon under Nocturnal Blood. And I'm hopefully at the end of March, the 3rd book will be published. So I'm looking for
So,
yeah.
And that.
okay, so I am confusingly 2 people, so this is going to take a while. All right, so I have a website which is TC Parker Writes. So that has both of me on it. But again, it's not straightforward to navigate, because why the fuck have I got 2 names? Do you know what I mean? The whole thing is stupid. Anyway, so there's a website. I tweet all the time at Writes TC. So you can find me on there. In terms of books, so I've got the 2 horror novels out. I've got Salt Blood and Oppressive Feathers, and they're both under TC Parker. You can find them on Amazon. I've also, under my own name, so under Nat Edwards, I've got a trilogy, the now finished trilogy of crime novels. The first one's called The Debt, the second one's called The Push, and the third one's called The Remembrance. So yeah, they're out again on Amazon. You can find them on the website. You can see them on the thingy. What do I mean? Twitter page. Other than that, I don't really do very much. So, but I'm confident you can find me if you try. It's all good. I'm there.
It's only 2 names.
Fine. Eventually, I'm just going to amalgamate them into like a single entity, but it'll take.
Yes, please.
Yeah, we all just want an easier life, I think. Janine.
I'll never forget the first time I realised who you were.
Oh my God!
I've been talking to you for ages, and you're this person.
It's all the fucking stupid things. You know what I mean? Oh yeah, it's like, oh, I'll start to publish some books. Now that's going to be easy anyway. But do you know how I can make it even easier for myself? It's to create 2 personas and put the books under them. Like, yes. Sorry. Anyway,
it was revelationary, really, because it was right at the heart of when everybody had Salt Blood, you know, on all of the booktube channels, and I was like coveting this beautiful book. And then Natalie Edwards sent me a message saying, would you like one? And I'm thinking, why? Why do you want it? Oh shit, that's why. Oh, it was brilliant. It was just like...
I gotta change that, seriously. It's just there is no point having two. You know what I mean? Like the crime novels, it's not like they're like cozy mysteries. You know what I mean? They're still about people getting murdered. People are still there's still crossover of people. Sorry. Anyway, Janine, where can you be found online?
Well, just we've always got our links down below anyway, but awesome. The best place to find me is Twitter, where I am Disney Neen, but it's spelt 9, and everybody gets really confused with that. And the reasoning behind that is that obviously my name's Janine, but a lot of my family call me Neen. And it made sense. It made sense to me all those years ago when I set up my Twitter account that I love Disney. A lot of people call me Neen or Jay, but at the time it's like my friends tend to call me Jay, but my family tend to call me Neen, so Disney Neen. But the amount of people have gone, why are you Disney 9? Because of course that's
I thought it was because Disney 1 to 8 had already been taken.
To be honest, I did have that.
I really wanted Disney 7 and some bastard had taken it, so I'm just Twitter's the best place to find me, but we have all our links. We'll link everything down below in the show notes.
Down below. Yeah, I'm on Twitter, and I very confusingly just changed my name on Twitter because I was Lucifer Speaks for ages, but now I'm Lou Yardley, which makes more sense.
I like
so now I have to go through and change all my links and everything. I was just sitting here while we were talking and thinking, best place to find me is on my website, and I thought, nope, link's wrong on there.
Oh my god, this is exactly why I'm thinking like it's going to be such a pain to switch. You know, if I do try and like amalgamate it, it's going to be such a fucking pain in the ass to just make sure everything's under the same umbrella. Like the admin of it's almost not worth it.
Yep.
There's your website, Goodreads page,
everything.
Amazon page.
Anyway, right now.
Was there, just before we finish up, was there anything else that either of you lovely ladies would like to say? Anything else that you wanted to plug, or do you think that we've covered everything quite nicely for you?
Read The One Who Got Away. Like Janine and I have got a story in there. It's good, I think. I hope.
I read yours this morning actually, and it's brilliant. I really enjoyed it. Yep, definitely. So read all of the stories, but read ours definitely.
Just plug
a second that plug. Like, just read it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. Yep.
Right, thank you all for coming. I'm going to go downstairs and see who that was.
For having us, and we'll speak to you later.
Lovely. Thank you very much, everyone.
See you later, guys.
Bye.